Hello and welcome to Solutions Review. Really excited to be here. I'm Prat Moghe, founder and CEO of Cazena. I'm going to be moderating a panel, and we have distinguished panelists today. Excited to welcome them. And essentially, our topic today is going to be best practices for data workers. So I'd like to welcome our panelists next. Hi, everyone. So we have, in no particular order, we have Ash Munshi, who's the CEO of Pepperdata. Hey, Ash.
Hey.
We have Josh Good, who's VP of Product Marketing at Qlik. Hi, Josh.
Hey, Brett.
And then we have Ingo Mierswa, who's the founder and CTO at RapidMiner. Hey, Ingo.
Hi, everybody.
So thanks so much for coming over to this panel today. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you on your insights. Again, I'd like to start maybe each of you, if you can introduce yourself. Before you guys get started, I'll just quickly introduce Cazena. So I'm the founder CEO of Cazena, and we offer instant cloud data lakes with the idea of making cloud data lakes easy for all enterprises, particularly as companies go from on-prem legacy environments and they're modernizing for AI and ML. Our experience is that data lakes are hard. We'd like to make them easy through automation. And we offer essentially an instant data lake, which can accelerate time to analytics from months to minutes. And again, we'll talk more in the panel on what we are seeing in the stack, but maybe I'll turn it over to Ash, if you could give a quick round of introduction on Pepperdata and yourself, and then we'll turn to Josh and then Ingo.
Sure. So Pepperdata provides observability and automatic optimization solutions for people running big data applications, particularly for, if you will, the modern analytics stack. My background is, originally scientist out of IBM, a number of executive positions at companies throughout the Valley, and serial entrepreneur.
Great, thanks. Josh?
Hi, so Qlik is a end-to-end data integration and analytics company. We're actually known very much for our visual analytics with our QlikSense product. And more recently, we've broadened into data integration, as well as we're moving into other sorts of data movement to drive more actions out of those insights that we're driving.
Thanks, Josh. Ingo?
Yeah, hi. I'm the founder and CTO of RapidMiner. RapidMiner is an end-to-end data science and machine learning platform. So that means that you can do everything from data integration, data preparation, especially for building complex machine learning and statistical models. But the twist with RapidMiner really is that we try to really provide depth for data scientists, people who are living and breathing in code and Python and R and statistics on the one hand, but at the same time, also offer a lot of automation and very simple to use approaches to machine learning, so that even if you don't have a PhD in statistics, you can build great machine learning models and go from end to end, as I said, from data prep, modeling, but also the deployment and management of those models, and well, do it whatever way you would like to do it.
That's great. Thanks again, Ingo. So we're going to talk about uncertain times, and we're going to talk about how to deal with uncertain times, particularly if you're a data worker. But before we go into the pandemic, what I'm interested in hearing is maybe from each of you, sort of think of it like a rapid fire set of questions. I'd really like to understand, if you look at the last 12 months, and you look at customers that you won or customers that are relying on your platform and your technology or your solution, can you share one interesting win or a customer where you're so excited about the value that you created with this customer that it's something that you'd like to share with everybody else? I'll start with Josh first.
Yeah, so there's a lot of them, but we have a retail customer, and it was actually an interesting story with them. We've been working with them for quite a while, and what happened, of course, is the pandemic came to be in March. Everyone just stopped and said, we're only doing essential things. Yeah. And this customer, of course, we had things going on to the end of the quarter and things like that, which didn't materialize. But what ultimately happened is once they got their feet back under them, they realized that very quickly the analytics capabilities were essential to make them nimble in this new time where everything was being replanned. And so they came back to us, and we were able to quickly restructure things and make it work in a way that would work for them. And ultimately, they had to retool a lot of their supply chain. They had to look at different metrics, and we were able to provide that flexibility with our technology that they needed to do that. So it was a really big win where we were able to be sensitive to the changes, but then also be able as well to adapt with them and actually provide them more flexibility going forward, so they could make those changes they needed to continue to be successful through the pandemic. And actually now they've set themselves up to accelerate their growth coming out of it.
That's a great story. How about you, Ingo?
Yeah, I immediately needed to think about a company which is running multiple large casinos in Las Vegas. And obviously they have been hit pretty hard. There was not a lot of business going on there. And so we have been talking to them for quite a while. And what turned out then, all of a sudden, things really accelerated quite a bit, like in, I would say, May, June, in that time frame.
And these were existing customers or new?
No, that's a brand new one. So but they've been in the pipeline for quite a while, and we always thought who knows if we ever will close this deal, and let's see. And then we actually asked why, what happened? So why now? I mean, and the answer was pretty obvious. Maybe it's simply because now they have the time to really go deep and actually really say well, look, if we do some analytics about the people who are actually coming to the casinos, if there's this constant stream of data, it's actually a hard time to do this and deal with this while you're still trying to optimize. Right now is the perfect time for us. So yeah, they became a client and very successful already. Most of their machine learning models are really around marketing efforts, not about the games themselves. But yeah, it was one of those moments where I thought, interesting. Probably without the pandemic, maybe that deal would not have even been happening. So who knows?
Yeah, no, it's a great time for reinvention, and I guess they can hyper target now that volume of.
They have to.
I got to be careful if I go to these casinos, I guess. And then, would you like to add any experiences here, Ash?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of Fortune 10 customers that are relying on us to keep things running. And what's interesting is they've got, think of it as billion-dollar on-prem spends, and they're moving to the cloud. Being able to support them, to being able to do that, being a partner in being able to understand what's going on, optimizing their current infrastructure so they don't have to spend any more in the infrastructure, and still be able to get them to the cloud in a cost-efficient way is something that's accelerated. And we're lucky to be partners with both of them. In one case, what was really satisfying was we were coming up with a renewal date, and they were really getting anxious about getting the renewal done, because if it didn't happen and our licenses expired, a big part of their infrastructure would have gone down. So it's kind of nice to know that we're critical there.
That's right. So Ash, you brought up an interesting point about the move to the cloud. At Cazena, what we are seeing is, interestingly, the pandemic clearly has a downside depending on the vertical you're in. For example, we have a large customer in the travel industry, and you can imagine the impact of pandemic on those customers. But in general, what we are seeing is the motion to cloud has actually intensified during the pandemic. And largely it's because of this idea that the cloud can reduce operational costs, reduce the dependence on operational skills. So on one hand, you see that this is attractive to many customers. On the other hand, as many of you know, that cloud's not a linear change from the on-premises environment. It's a different mindset. You're going from enterprise IT to the DevOps mindset. The security model ends up being different. The pay-as-you-go type business model is a shock to many of these enterprises because they have never really thought about it that way. And on the other hand, there's clearly big relief on the cloud because you got, at least in our data lake world, unlike classic on-premises environment, you can decompose storage and compute, so you can grow things more efficiently. And and you got a whole slew of new open source engines. So I'm clearly seeing that there is an acceleration in motion to the cloud. But yet, the question to you is, in a time like this, when many companies are cutting back, it's not easy to find new talent. So do you have any observations on, like in your customer base, as you're seeing the motion to cloud, what's working well, what's not working well? Anything you could share in terms of, impact on data scientists, data engineers, BI analysts, or even operational people? It'd be great to hear some first-hand stories. Ash, you want to go first?
Yeah. So, a few things. First is, going from CapEx to OpEx is definitely a shock to people, right? And they get these bills. They don't understand where the hell the bill came from and why. And that's because, IT's been around putting a nice warm blanket around people, and people think, oh, it's constraining, but at the same time, it's also helpful. Getting that blanket around them off has caused a lot of spend to go crazy, and being able to understand the spend, where the spend is actually going. And are you actually, while you have flexibility, are you actually solving the right problems, or is a data scientist just doing queries for the sake of doing queries? These are kind of questions that come up frequently that we see. So cost overruns. The other part of it is, do you do a lift and shift migration, or do you do a re-architecture? And I think we're seeing both things happen. Lift and shift is clearly happening, and there's good reason to do lift and shift. But if you're going to go to the cloud, there's a fundamental notion of, why don't we rethink the architecture of what we're building? Do we use more cloud services, et cetera? The other thing that we're seeing is a hybrid situation, right? So this is all around Kubernetes. So, people are using EKS, which is the Amazon Kubernetes service, and then we've got the equivalent of that running in the data centers themselves. So there is also a migration to a more modern system, which is Kubernetes, and then being able to then slosh back and forth between the cloud and on-prem. We're in the largest customers, we're seeing IT coming back and being able to exercise control over spend, because the business units have completely gone amok. I think on the data science side, what's interesting is, GPU instances are still very expensive for doing training. So, there's an interesting thought about, buying some GPU instances locally versus not using them in the cloud, because the cost efficiency is significantly better there. The problem that always winds up is, where does the data live, right? So data gravity is probably the biggest issue that everybody faces. How much of my data do I move? How well is it protected? Is it part of my network or not? What's the latency that I'm going to pay? And then the other place where people get killed is on egress costs. What people don't realize is that egress is very expensive. So these are all the things that we're seeing our customers sort of wrestle with in terms of the problems they're having going to the cloud.
Yeah, we're seeing similar things. I think the big difference, I think what we see at Qlik, because we're a lot of analytics focused, so we're dealing a lot more with the business users and then the data integration side as well. And we're seeing a move to cloud that's really strong and deliberate, and it's coming from places we wouldn't have expected it a few years ago. Like our banking customers are our biggest movers to cloud right now. A few years ago, never ever. Banking, healthcare can't go fast enough to the cloud, which is really interesting, and that's moving the data gravity as well, really, really rapidly. And the lift and shift versus a re-architect. What we're seeing most common is an addition on the cloud first. So it's not really a full re-architecture. It's, we're going to move to the cloud for this new project. We're going to run hybrid for a while, and we will migrate over. And they don't always say years, but the reality is that's what we're seeing. We predict is going to happen. Is it's going to be over years. People are going to move to the cloud. There's this hybrid scenario is going to be long lasting. Yeah. And that's a big challenge, because the data gravity problem then becomes, well, where is the data? You're like, well, it's a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. And particularly the vendors who are trying to lock in data to their platforms becomes good for the vendors, can be challenging for our customers because they have, you know, two sets of data and one is locked into one platform, one's locked into the other. What do you do about that? So that's something that our customers are wrestling with quite a bit, about how you pick that data strategy of where your data is going to reside and how you're going to deal with egress.
And Josh, in what you're seeing, what's driving it? What's driving these banking customers and healthcare customers? I mean, in the last few years, it was all about PII, regulatory constraints. There was a bit of, I think, red herring on, you know, it's not secure. But
Yeah.
what changed?
You know what's driving it? It's amazing to say this, and I would have called myself a liar a few years ago. Reducing risk is what's driving it.
Yeah.
The security concerns are completely manageable. Like you have to pay attention to PII, you have to pay attention to, you know, brute force attacks, you know, all the various things that can happen, but they're all completely manageable and they're more or less known problems at this point. The problems that aren't known are, how big is my infrastructure need to be on premise? Is my team going to take the servers down if they do something silly? Those are unknown problems. So they can manage all of these historic risk or objections to go moving to the cloud, and they get all the benefits of lower risk of a system outage, lower risk around doing upgrades, lower cost around doing upgrades. You get better latency in most cases. And as well as a better service to the ultimate users.
Right.
So it's really, that's driving it is TCO and risk. And then the other thing that it's really interesting, kind of surprised me, is and a lot of times we get the objection of, well, but you're going to upgrade it for me. It's SaaS. You'll just upgrade it for me, and I don't know if I want to take the latest version. The customers come back to us a few months later and they're like, that's awesome. You know, I say I need something new, it shows up. I never have to worry about it. It's just there and it works. And if it doesn't work, you fix it in like a day. It's faster than I know there's a problem. Because, you know, every once in a while, our software vendors, you know, we need to, you know, correct our software, or I should say improve it. Yeah.
Well, that's totally, I think what we're seeing is sort of this mindset of a SaaS type experience from, you know, this idea that, you know, if it's a SaaS software, I shouldn't be worrying about, you know, the stack working. Obviously, the vendor's got to take the responsibility for making sure the stack works. It doesn't always work, but that's a big part of the value. Ingo, what are you seeing in terms of?
We see a similar, we see a similar trend for sure. But it's actually interesting. People are also consumers. I mean, even in the enterprise and business world, obviously everybody's used to stuff which just works and that you're just used to get the latest and greatest features or whatever it is. So I think that's also partly which was driving it to some degree, this higher level of acceptance away from like, hey, I'm running the risk that maybe the feature is missing or something is no longer working, towards like, it's just fantastic that I don't need to deal with this. That's definitely one thing. And from a technology perspective, what I would like to add is it's actually fantastic that we have something like Kubernetes today, where we can almost replicate a multi-tenant cloud stack on a, let's say, single-tenant on-prem installation. But that also means that you all of a sudden, especially in those hybrid situations, you have a lack of talent. So it's really, in our case, I kind of start to get the feeling that it's no longer that hard to find great engineers, but it's much harder at this point to actually find equally great DevOps people who can also then be customer-facing DevOps people to actually help our clients in those sometimes very complex setups. Right. Because many organizations, they're not ready for that, fully ready. They think it should be easy if you can run it on Amazon or Google, then it should be possible to replicate here, and it is. But it also requires a certain skill set, and if they don't have that, then all of a sudden, as a software vendor, you feel the need to augment this to some degree as well.
And are you doing that at RapidMiner, where the idea of offering a fully managed RapidMiner so that customers don't have to worry about?
Yeah, we maybe do the worst of all the possible options. We offer all three things. We kind of have the multi-tenant SaaS offering where people share the resource, which obviously is a very, very cost-effective way of doing data science, because often those demands come in peaks. So if you do the modeling, we talked about GPUs already, but that's only one little piece. If you compute any kind of machine learning model, it's very demanding, but typically it's not demanding for like weeks in a go. It could be, let's say, demanding once, and then if you deploy that model, it's coming again in smaller little peaks over time. So if you can share the same compute resources across multiple tenants, obviously that brings the cost down significantly. So that's one way we're offering our software. But then there's also like managed services, so where we use our AI hub and offer this as a managed service to our clients. But then you can do the same thing, both actually, our RapidMiner Go stack, which is the SaaS offering, as well as the managed services, and install them on premises if that's what you would like to do. And the underlying technologies are pretty much all the same. It's really more like the way how things are set up and supported then. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is where containers help in general.
Big time.
Movement helps. I mean, we did an interesting study of, this is back to the Ingo's point of, technologies are innovative, but consuming technologies requires these companies to have these DevOps skills. And while it's tempting to think like, the Fortune 100 probably have those skills, but if you go down below, into these other companies that are going on-prem to cloud, those are very hard skills to find. We did a benchmark that for $1 of spend on the cloud stack, there's probably these companies need to spend $5 to $6 on DevOps to be able to consume that cloud stack. And that's just not necessarily a scalable model for the companies that are not in that top bracket. And so that's kind of what we call as the DevOps drag. And so it would be interesting to see how automation helps with that going forward. Now let me turn to sort of a different thread here. So as you think about data scientists, let's just like focus on that persona. I just wanted to take each one of the data workers and like, let's talk about what's going on. And particularly with the pandemic, what are you guys seeing as challenges and opportunities? So if you think about data scientists, what's going on in the world of data science? Obviously, machine learning is here to stay. It's sort of like crossed into that sort of a, past the hype cycle, I guess, into sort of like the next phase. And very interesting things like ML ops, auto ML, data wrangling. There's a bunch of these things that are coming, consolidation in some of these vendors. But in general, if you're a data scientist, quick observations on how to deal with uncertain times. Where do you focus on, investing in in terms of your career, your skills, anything that you guys would like to share? I'll start with Ingo first.
Yeah, that's. I definitely saw a big shift this year, and for one, I'm actually, well, I'm not happy about the pandemic. Obviously, nobody is, but I'm happy that it forced people, data scientists, very smart people, to rethink what they are doing on a daily basis. Because I've seen people who have been wasting almost all their efforts over the last couple of years on becoming better and better on modeling, like squeezing out another % of model accuracy to be able to predict pretty much everything perfectly well. But then in times like these, it then happens that those perfect models are not even remotely perfect, because they're good at that snapshot of time, but they are not very robust, or we also call them sometimes resilient. Because like if the world changes just a little bit, and this is a known concept, we call this like a data drift or concept drift. We know this since decades. The world typically changes slowly all the time. That's why you always need to operate your models, you need to manage them, you need to monitor how well they're performing. That's why we have this need in the first place. But this change in years like this, or same was true for the financial crisis, if those changes are accelerated, then all of a sudden you realize, oopsie, the more time I wasted almost into tweaking this model even further and tweaking all the different parameters, that actually makes my model worse in times like these, pretty much useless at this point. And what I didn't like and never liked about the field of data science is that there's a lack of accountability. People create those models, they throw them out, then you start basing business decisions on that, and then, well, if things go wrong, like, whoa, I don't know, the world has changed. Yeah, but you also have created a model which was not able to deal with this change, and that was not necessary, and this is a result of wrong incentives. We train our students already to actually keep tweaking models versus thinking about what impact this model has in the real world, and then take ownership. So it's not just a technology change we need here, more model ops. That is pretty obvious. We need a bit of a cultural change there. We need to change our own behavior, and situations like this force this change, and so that's actually a pretty good thing.
And so what do you see data scientists do differently now?
So first of all, yeah, so it's actually funny. Do you know this famous Netflix challenge, this $1 million prize money, which they gave out, I think, in 2009? So this was, by the way, just for those who don't know the story, it's actually a fascinating thing. It went for 3 years. I think they started this challenge in 2006, and they promised $1 million to the person or the team who optimized the existing recommendation model of Netflix by at least 10% in correctness, okay? So again, wrong incentive. So like, what's the point? Like, it's already a good model. Why make it even better? I mean, why wasting time on that, really? So it took researchers around the globe more than 3 years to beat this goal, okay? 40,000 people worldwide participate in this whole thing. 3 years. I don't want to even calculate like what the cost of this whole thing. So one team finally won this, and it was pretty dramatic because 2 teams had the exact same result, and then one team submitted the result 20 minutes early. It was just, by the way, I was one of the participants.
Anyway, 3 years of your life.
Finally, some team won this $1 million prize money. Okay. And Netflix, as part of this contest, they owned now the rights to this algorithm. Guess what happened? They never published it. They never used it. They never actually put it into production. So again, what is the point? So, and yes, I see a change. People still participate in Kaggle contests, and that's okay. If it's for fun and education, do that. You can learn a lot from that. But for the real world, people start now to realize, oh, wait a second, that's not really what can happen. So people started now changing the behavior, spending less time on model tweaking, more time in actually, for example, things like feature engineering, getting equally good models with less features, which typically makes the model more robust. And by the way, also more understandable, which is another thing. The reason that we talk now about understandable models is, and again, is a result of some of the changes we have seen in the last couple of years. So that is a good thing, because more understandable models typically tend to not be gradient boosted trees or like deep learning networks. They actually tend to be much simpler, again, which also makes them more robust.
Yeah.
So people shifted their own focus, and they now also realize that model ops is actually not just a bad tool to control if they do a good work. It's actually a necessity to also being able to take some ownership, and they start to appreciate that at this point.
And making it
change, but it happens.
And making it more transparent as sort of part of software discipline, right?
Yeah, and software vendors like ourselves, we obviously can support that.
Yeah.
We can enable people to understand that, but also we can provide the tools to actually build more resilient models, but also do the model management. So that's why we invest into this.
Yeah, what I'm seeing too is there's a much more of a desire from the I'll call it the regular business side to access those models from data scientists. You know, the data scientists, you know, maybe a little bit of reputation of the guys in the corners with the lab coats who have all the answers, and you have to go to them every time you have a question. And what we're seeing is much more desire to get those models integrated into regular analytics, I'll call it, so that, you know, like literally anybody who can use a mouse and understand a bar chart can be running and using those models in the decisions they're making. And that makes them even more important. What Ingo was talking about, the resiliency of these, come even more important, because now the data scientist starts to lose control about how that model's being used and how the decisions being made on it. And it can be, you know, third, fourth order type decisions that that push out there. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic which is happening. It's making it, the data science, less magic, more common, and more used across the organization, which turns the data scientists into a little bit more of a service provider and less of an answer machine. And it's a big mind shift I've seen in data scientists to be, how do I get my work out into more people's hands versus me coming and being the special person who has the data science, and it's too complicated for everybody else.
And just as a super brief follow-up on that point, Josh, now think about this. This was actually one of the main drivers for automated machine learning, which is fantastic. I for one, I want any possible solution which makes myself unnecessary. That's a good thing. But then at the same time, we also need to accept that most AutoML vendors are over-focusing on actually model accuracy. Again, they're repeating the same mistake, but now it's done by a robot. Fantastic. So what I really think is actually, again, AutoML is perfect. I want everybody to be able to machine learning models, but you have to combine it with some form of model management, because otherwise that's a recipe for a disaster. So, yeah.
I meant to just sort of shifting gears to a different persona. So with Qlik and sort of Josh, like as you look at the world, what's going on with analysts, the BI analysts, sort of, because there was this whole move on citizen data scientists and this idea of the analytics world, and what you're seeing is interesting things like when you look at Qlik, Tableau, that category. Then there's another sort of search related category with ThoughtSpot and a few of these other. Like, what are you seeing in general? If you're an analyst and you're looking at tools, you're also thinking about sharpening your skills, thinking about weathering the storm. Can you share what's working? Where should you double down? What should you stop doing? Anything?
So there's a bit of a split I'm seeing in the analyst community, and there's analysts who are going down the road of I'm going to produce more analytics for other people to consume based on their questions they want. And it's alluring. It sort of drives that visualization trend that was happening over the last few years. And it's like, hey, we'll go to Sally or we'll go to Bob, and Bob has the answer every time. Those analysts, I think, are they'll be useful, but they aren't driving real business value in the same ways that what we're seeing other analysts do, which is they're actually getting more out of like building dashboards and much more into advocating data literacy across the organization, enabling others, and almost becoming teacher coaches. And I think that's the future for analysts. And the best analysts I'm seeing almost become, they often buddy up with a key leader and almost become that leader's COO in a lot of ways. They know what's going on. They have their access to the data, but they're involved in driving the strategy and less involved in driving the numbers.
That's exactly what we're seeing is the sort of the data strategist or data architects kind of become key because they start thinking about the platform. They start thinking about they're usually good at also doing business cases, which data scientists are not. Many of them are not. So I think if they could team up and pair, I think we see a lot of goodness. Anything in terms of stack, Josh? Where is the analytics stack going? As you think about Qlik, you obviously have a strategy on consolidation or sort of creating an end-to-end value. What's the vision there?
Yeah, so where the stack is going, I hate the term stack, but we all use it, and I'll use it too because I don't have a better word either. Where I see it going is like we're at the point now where, like, let's be honest, getting a bar chart on a screen next to a pie chart isn't really that exciting anymore. It used to be, but we've moved well beyond that in terms of our capabilities of technology across the board. So where are things really going? Data integration and the move to being able to access data yourself and even integrate data yourself. That self-service trend is moving upstream towards that. So cataloging is becoming a big part of that. So now users can just go and access a catalog and even contributing to that catalog in various ways, which also brings in, making sure that data pipeline is analytics ready. And that brings in architecture and so forth. On the other side of it, so if you sort of think of like a dashboard as the center of what I'm talking about, because that's our frame of reference for a lot of people. The other side, what we're seeing is the dashboard is losing prominence in terms of the importance of making decisions, and other modes of providing information like alerting, mobile devices, conversational analytics. I think it was interesting you separated what Qlik does and some of those more search-based. I don't see those as separate. I think that's really a feature that's essential now in analytics. Mm-hmm. We have conversational analytics, we have search-based analytics, and we put a lot of actually time and R&D effort into augmented analytics. So that's driving more users to get access to analytics and be able to, and with less skill. And then the next phase of that is driving actual action. So, and that's where, it used to be a big deal. You're like, hey, I got the number. Now it's, what do I do with the number? And actually moving beyond that and automating what you do with the number or the result or insight, I should really say. And that's going to be automating, notifying people, and also automating actual intelligent actions based on things. So the example I like to use is, you get unexpected orders in, and automatically an analysis is done that realizes that will affect your ability in your factories. So a purchase order is created to order more raw materials, which is then sent to someone in an alert on a mobile device for approval of that purchase order with an explanation on why that needs to be done. And so that's it's still bringing the human into it, but we're automating the rote tasks even to the decision point and the action point.
Yeah, that's very helpful and insightful. Ash, I'd like to move to a slightly different area, which is, we've talked about data scientists, we talked about analysts, bringing it back to the platform. There's seismic shifts going on, right? Like when you look at the move to the cloud, when you look at, move to object store, when you think about serverless, when you think about containers, when you think about multi-cloud, the average enterprise is, there's a lot of complex decisions on which cloud, which technologies, which stack. What are you seeing in terms of the platform expertise, right? In terms of price performance, in terms of availability, in terms of, in general, the whole IT mindset of monitoring price performance and understanding what's going on, how well are we doing? The data architect as a sort of a persona, when you look at what they're facing and how they make decisions on what's the best architecture, what are you seeing, particularly with Pepperdata, the way you're looking at the stack, and you're helping give confidence to people as they make decisions on what's the best stack, how do I optimize it, how do I make sure it's up and running? Anything you could share in terms of things that data architects should focus on or double down on?
Let me actually go back a little bit to the previous conversation, because I just wanted to make a point there. Notebooks are becoming a very powerful user interface.
That's right.
And what's interesting about notebooks is that they're unifying all the three worlds that we talked about earlier. They're unifying the analyst, the machine learning guy, and also the casual user. Because depending on the level of expertise, you can get access to lots of different things from that one single interface and be able to do a tremendously good job. That's why you see an absolute explosion in, for example, Jupyter Notebook utilization, et cetera, right? And I think that venue for being able to get access to data and models and visualizations and all that stuff that you and I can use that, sort of normal user can use, and then an expert can also take advantage of, all in one place, is a tremendous driver. And I think it will be a tremendous driver over the next few years. That becomes, in my opinion, a tremendous interface for dealing with data in general. The second point I'd like to make is that, so far in the panel, we've talked really about AI and various other things in what I would call IT-related things. But when you start thinking about cameras being deployed in fields, things where the lens becomes dirty, the time of day changes, models drift, the entire notion of model drift and how you actually capture the data that caused your model to drift is an extremely important problem for the real world. I'll give you a simple example. When Uber was doing their models for pedestrian detection and things of that sort across different cities, the two basic cities they worked on were Pittsburgh and the Bay Area, right? And so they developed models for that. When they went to Arizona and they deployed the models, what wound up happening was their accuracy levels and their ability to do was not nearly as good. People dressed differently, the lighting was different, and all these other things. Real world is really important. And deploying models in the real world means you have to absolutely not just do model evolution, but also data evolution. What data do I need in order to capture the changes that I need in order to put back into my model, right? And then the third observation I'd make around that is that, machine learning, most people would be just happy if they could develop a simple statistics model. And, the thing I always like to tell, so I've been doing machine learning for a long time. I ran Yahoo's research organization. We participated in the Netflix challenge and all these other things, right? A lot of people think they're going to do deep learning, and there's no reason for them to do deep learning. Simple statistics will solve the problem just fine. And, I think as was pointed out, if you just figure out what specific parameters you need, to be able to train a simple machine learning model, what I would call classic machine learning model, is good enough. Unfortunately, a lot of people go for the deep learning model. They don't need it. They don't need anywhere near the complexity that they think they need. They just need simple models to be able to do that, but understand how to deploy it and how to react to changes. So that's sort of my comment on the previous conversation. In terms of what we're seeing is, I think we touched on this earlier, right? Which is the skill set is changing. And the access to the skill set for understanding how do I deal with the cloud versus what do I do on-prem? And in particular, you start thinking about Kubernetes. We talked about Kubernetes in multiple ways. There's this unified infrastructure across both cloud and this, whether it's multi-cloud, single cloud, or whatever, different people are approaching it differently. But there is a unified infrastructure. Having people who understand how to deploy it, how to optimize it, how to do that is difficult for most people today. The largest enterprises that we deal with are basically saying, here's how I'm going to do things. I'm going to be multi-cloud. I don't want to be stuck with anybody. I can't be a single cloud provider. I have to have two cloud providers because for me to manage corporate risk, I have to be able to manage one off the other. But what the problem that creates is the infrastructure problem is I've got my own data center and I've got two cloud providers.
Yeah.
Now I have to manage latency. How do I get data to go back and forth? So what they're doing is they're negotiating very, very hard on egress costs. And they're also negotiating very hard to make sure that I can actually be on the same virtual private network, right? So that my latencies are bound and I can now solve problems depending on who's got better stuff in different places. And oh, by the way, data gravity to some extent alleviated because I can smush things around because I can move them around fast enough to be able to make that work. The biggest enterprises are doing that path. Yeah. But the number of tools available to allow them to understand what happens, and they do that across all these different things. So think about a single panel to be able to see everything. That's the difficult part. Because right now it's a mishmash of things. I got data feeds coming in, and I've got to go develop my own dashboards to be able to do that. That's one of the things that we do really well at Pepperdata, right? Is take all of these things and really unify it so they can take a look at everything in one spot and be able to understand all the different interactions that take place. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks, Ash. I mean, that's a really hard problem. And I think as we talked about the challenges that, the Fortune 50 can step back and think about this as a sort of a three-way problem, and they can abstract things and then but it's really hard for the common enterprise. I think we have this balance of innovation going on at hyperscale with cloud providers, but we got the average enterprise that's thinking about how do I do this in a way without actually going all into one of these cloud providers, and that's not an easy problem. While you're thinking about the on-prem, one thing we definitely are seeing is we talked about unification of workloads, right? Notebook was a good example, I think, Ash, that you gave, where you take Jupyter Hub, the fact that you can do Python and R and you can do ML and you can do SQL, and everything can essentially be combined. And when my 16-year-old starts to code and he just goes and starts doing things in a month's time, he has literally no baggage in terms of the old communities. So they just pick up things on the fly and they start coding, and that's really encouraging. And the nice thing is we have platforms, for example, in the earlier days, it was data warehousing for SQL, and it was this for that. And now there's no such, you can put data on object store, and you can spin up different compute engines, whether they're SQL, Spark, Search, NoSQL. And there's a wide variety of databases to pick. And there is a huge plethora of tools on top, which are really rich. So I think it's the orchestration of all this innovative stack that's the challenge. And again, we talked about DevOps skills and people who can figure out how to operationalize and secure. And I think security is going to be another really hard area where data security is not an easy task. And again, finding people who can figure out how to create end-to-end identity management for this complex stack, fine-grained access control and authorization, single sign-on, auditing, compliance, masking, all of these things we take for granted, but these are not easy things to deliver in this kind of a distributed model. Anything else that you guys would like to share in terms of, we got a few minutes left. going around. Would you like to share anything about what you're seeing, how you're seeing your customers deal with the pandemic? Anything that you can share in terms of do's, don'ts? I'll sort of go around the panel. Josh, starting with you.
I mean, for me, it's don't freeze. That's the thing with the pandemic. I mean, I think Winston Churchill said, "Never let a crisis go to waste." And we have fantastic opportunities right now, particularly in data and analytics. The entire world understands what an exponential curve looks like. Unfortunately, we also understand what a flat curve looks like as well. And so this is a great opportunity to look at the value that your analytics can deliver to your organization, the opportunity to change the way you're doing things, because everyone's open to change right now. And if you're not open to change, you're having it anyway. So, really, don't freeze, and use this as a great opportunity to reset where you need to and to progress your journey in analytics while this atmosphere of change is occurring in the world.
Thanks. Ingo, I know you also wanted to comment on the Uber story. You saw this comment. Maybe you made it a while back. Sorry.
Yeah, I can do this quickly, but I can also give you a comment on the opportunity and changes which are needed, I guess. Now, the Uber story, Ash, reminded me really of the fact that detecting this data drift, for example, or the fact that, hey, this model trained in Pittsburgh doesn't work in Arizona, well, who knew? Also, actually, it's just the other side of the same coin, which is called bias. Because it's coming back to the question of like, well, what's the training data? What's the data selection you're doing? Like, and if you just train in one city, you should be surprised that in different climate regions, that this model with different light, with different streets, with different people, clothes, you mentioned this, that things do not work. Well, guess what? If you train your models only on a small subgroup of your clients, for example, you should not be surprised that they don't work on others. And that can go that far. And we have seen horrible examples of things going wrong in the news in the last year, that certain groups would be discriminated by models. That's why I, for one, definitely encourage the whole world to embrace ideas like GDPR, where at least, well, to some degree, the right to explanation, if a model is discriminating me, I should at least have the right to understand why, and if there has been any features being used which could actually give me away in terms of age or race or whatever it is. So it's really the same problem, actually, and also the solutions are actually the same, but at the end of the day, it requires humans to pay attention to this.
I think, Ingo, if I may, before you go to your next thing, I think data literacy becomes so essential there, to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And like my favorite example of this is there was a model that came up a while back that could predict someone's sexual orientation with 80% accuracy based on one picture.
Yeah.
And I actually have a better model than that one that can be 90% accurate, because about 10% of people don't identify as heterosexual. So I just label everyone heterosexual and I'm 90% accurate. So asking the right question and understanding data literacy like that is essential to that. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, 100%. By the way, if I could just get one wish, I know it's short before the holidays, whatever, like it would be putting actually analytics and training students analytics into school. And I mean school, not high school or whatever, college, no, starting way earlier, but that's a whole different topic. Now, the other thing was really about what to do differently. And here's an opportunity. Most of us work remotely right now. I mean, I do most of the time, and pretty much all the RapidMiner folks do. We talked about notebooks and the collaboration aspect of that. And RapidMiner is offering this exactly the same, also using notebooks, but also more. And the collaboration is not between one data scientist with another. It's often between a data scientist and a domain expert, together with somebody who is working in data engineering. So being remote actually allows us to get a little bit out of our peer groups. Like, well, why not working with Jane from marketing, or with whatever, Sally from data engineering, and actually really building those little task forces. We are all sitting anywhere in the world. It doesn't really matter as long as we can juggle with the time zones. And I've seen some of our clients actually starting to do this more often now, because they kind of like feel like, oh yeah, it's easier than ever. And I love that, because I want this collaboration between data scientists, who indeed can sometimes be a little bit ivory tower-ish. And then, yeah, but they have their strength, no question about that. But then, hey, just the other, like business analysts, domain experts, subject matter experts. It really, those people need to come together, and that's now easier than ever. And I've seen this now a couple of times happening, and whenever I did, good things happen.
So,
we sometimes like to talk about how the distance on Zoom is the same between, it sort of equalizes. Zoom is the great equalizer. And particularly if you think about customer engagement, or you think about developers trying to get closer to customers, which I think is a great opportunity. Like we see that at Cazena, because we're trying to disrupt the model where there's support and there's success and there's developers and there's solution architects, sort of like it's all a DevOps mentality. And so this idea that you can just pop into a customer's Zoom and they see you got a dog, they have a cat, and you get talking. It's just like, it's a very different thing from the traditional thing that the sales guy would go to the customer, take them to the steakhouse, and it's all very regimented. And now suddenly it's very different because the customers are seeing how the code is being shipped. Now there's like a Slack channel interact. So just the model has been changed. And what we are seeing in the pandemic is you can now do a lot more frequent, short engagements with customers, not just the buyer, but also the users and data scientists and data engineers, anybody who's using like the Cazena data lake. There's a lot more frequent access, and that builds up a tighter relationship from a customer engagement. And likewise with, if you had told me before the pandemic that you could go close large deals with customers without ever traveling to the customer, it would have been hard to believe that. But it's really interesting. In the pandemic, both sides are now used to the model. They're consuming information all the time online anyways. They can do effective demos. They can get reference calls done. Contracts are all online. It's pretty amazing to me that these things can happen. Right?
From our perspective, I mean, we've been, even pre-pandemic, we've been closing, very significant deals online without ever going to visit a customer. Fundamentally, we've been sort of a distributed organization from that perspective, right? So we don't care where anybody lives or does anything else. We're completely open to adopting, and we have adopted a completely fluid way of actually working. The one thing I do want to go back and talk about this notion of analytics for a second. There was an article, a cartoon in the New Yorker many years ago, and it shows a guy who's watching television, and the guy on television says the number of useless statistics has gone up 13% since last month. Right? And that one is the one that I always tell people, because it's wonderful to have analytics, but you have to analyze the right thing. The thing that it really needs to do is ask the right question.
Yeah.
And the problem here is that in this desire to accelerate, we don't take time to ask the right question. Are we building the model? Should we be building the model? It's not whether the model is accurate or not. Why are we building it?
Are we modeling the right thing?
That aren't being asked. And part of the problem here is being remote. Is we try to accelerate. Hey, let's build another one. Let's build another one. Let's build another one. And the reality of it is you get a whole bunch of stuff and you have absolutely no understanding of what happens. So one of the fundamental problems with machine learning is it doesn't give you causality. And the problem is it gives you correlation. Causality is the fundamental thing that we're trying to understand as business people. When I do this, what happens as a result of that? And the problem is we put lots of statistics up, and those statistics don't give us any better understanding of how the business actually functions. So while it's perfectly fine to get an order and ship it out to a guy who is going to satisfy the order, you have to ask the question, is that in fact the right thing to do? Yeah. Right? Yes, I automate that process, but is that in fact the right thing to do? That level of analysis is fundamentally missing, right? I serve on a number of boards and a number of other things, and I can tell you, that's the thing that I really caution people on is don't get carried away. Technology is there as a tool to solve a problem, understand the problem first, and then let's put the right infrastructure in place to solve it.
Those are really good points, Ash. I think that's sort of the what I see as being helpful is this ecosystem of, this is why you need the breadth of data workers. I think data strategists, data analysts, data scientists, and data engineers. Because once you get hold of data and you actually start working with the data and start thinking about where the data came from and how it came and what's in the data, a lot of the data prep and data engineering actually helps clarify some of these questions that you put on the table, Ash, which is like, what is the data actually about? What are we modeling? What is the business process that we're looking at? What's the physics? There is a physical thing that's going on here. Who is the customer? What are they going through? What's creating the need for them to buy something? How many times are they coming back? And do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's really about raising the fundamental questions.
Right.
And then machine learning becomes like, it's at the tail end of it.
Correct.
Like really thinking about how do I optimize and
right. I just want to leave you one other little anecdote from my history. I was making a presentation to the executive team at John Deere many years ago, and at that time I worked at Oracle, and we were doing this big song and dance about how Oracle was wonderful and this and that and everything else. And after we got done, we had about 100 executives in the audience, and one of them raises his hand and says, I have no idea what you just said for the last half hour. All I want to know is, how is it going to help me build a better tractor?
Yep.
Right? You have to tie it back to what's the fundamental problem the customer is trying to solve.
Right.
The technology is a means to an end. It's not, we get excited because we do all this wonderful shit because we love it, but the customer doesn't care. There's a specific thing that they want answered, right? How do I build a better tractor? And if you start thinking that way, then you line everything up and say, what's the stack that's needed to answer that question?
That's right.
That's all that matters.
And I think, Ash, rarely when you ask the customer, what's the problem you're trying to solve, do you get the real answer on the first answer they give you. They often will say, like, I need a better forecast, or I need a better this, or, I need to optimize my supply chain. Well, and, and you sort of get the 7 why challenge and so forth. And I've seen a lot of our customers, one of the things that they don't know often what they're trying to solve. And that process of going through that is something we also need to be assisting them with, because otherwise you end up, they go, that's exactly what I asked you for, and I don't need it.
By the way, we got 2 minutes left. So last 60-second thoughts, Josh, and then...
I just used my 60 seconds, so I'll pass.
Ingo?
Well, I think we can summarize a lot of the stuff we said today on maybe the 3 words: impact over optimization. It's really kind of like, let's stop keeping to optimize. Let's actually make sure that all the things we do have the right impact. And that obviously starts with the question first, like, well, what is it actually we want to have impact on? And then after you figure that one out, I agree, machine learning is sometimes the right tool and sometimes not. And within the machine learning, I'm always for going simpler over overly complex, because it also comes with a lot of other things. Having said all of that, and I'm 100% behind that, we've been flying on the moon, and there have been so many technological advantages coming out of that. Nobody expected them. So I'm personally somewhere in between. I think, yes, if I talk to a customer, it's always about the impact. But am I still excited about some of the new things going on? Of course I am. And I'm looking forward to more of that.
Awesome. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for joining me. It's really great to get to know some of you, because we didn't know each other, and this is a great forum to get to know each other, and big fan of many of your technologies. So really appreciate you sharing your observations. All I can say, and I agree with all of you, is that this is a great time for reinvention. So if you're a data worker, there's no better time than now to get your hands dirty on the stack, on data, and ultimately understanding how to solve these customer problems. With that, we'll round out our panel. Thanks again for your time, and look forward to catching up. If there's any questions that we did not take, happy to follow up with you guys offline. Over to you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.